If you're shopping while working, eating, or even listening to this podcast, then you know and love the thrill of a deal. But are you getting the deal and cash back? Rakuten shoppers do. They get the brands they love, savings, and cash back. And you can get it too. Start getting cash back at your favorite stores like Levi's, Plow and Hearth, Adidas, Sephora, and Neiman Marcus. Stack sales on top of cash back and feel what it's like to know you're maximizing the savings. And it's easy to use. And you get your cash back sent to you through PayPal or check. The idea is simple. Stores pay Rakuten for sending them shoppers, and Rakuten shares the money with you as cash back. Download the free Rakuten app or go to Rakuten.com to start saving today. It's the most rewarding way to shop. That's Rakuten. Rakuten.com.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
It's basically become the go-to personal therapist, professional chef, emergency response personnel, built-in best friend, unofficial ghostwriter, licensed doctor, you name it.
My carbon monoxide detector just keeps beeping. Do you think I should call 911?
Just ask ChatGPT.
I still haven't written my vows, and my wedding is literally tomorrow. I'm screwed.
Bro, I told you, just ask Chat.
My husband's gaining a lot of weight. How do I tell him I'm not attracted to him anymore?
Personally, I have no idea, but just ask Chat.
I need to write a eulogy for my friend's funeral. How do you think I should start it?
I don't know, ask Chat.
I'm starting to feel these weird chest pains. Do you think I should see a doctor?
What would Chat say?
The engine light in my car came on. What should I do?
Well, why don't we ask ChatGPT?
Turning to ChatGPT, or any chatbot, for just about anything and everything. Which, sure, if it helps make things more efficient for you, or it can maybe do a task you've been dreading on doing. Like, full transparency, I've definitely used Chat for a dessert recipe based on the ingredients I had at home, which I think is fine. Listen, it's a quote you've probably heard before. You can't beat AI, you just have to learn to live with it. And while that's not bad advice, the entire world right now is living in a literal history textbook lesson published in the year 2070. AI's baby era. Not to say AI is new, but way more accessible to the average person. We're in a time of having this extremely powerful technology at the tips of our fingers with very little how-to. And I'm not talking about what prompts to feed it. The opposite, actually. When to not feed it prompts. When to shoot down the idea of turning to Chat, especially on matters more personal, like your marriage or your parents' relationship with your spouse. Because again, it's just a robot without actual feelings or empathy, but rather the code to make you keep using it, which probably isn't the best personal therapist you can find. I'm Maria Kestane, and today on The Big Story, I'm talking to Maggie Harrison Dupré, senior writer for Futurism, to discuss AI's bold, fast, and sometimes destructive third wheel to our everyday interactions and relationships. Maggie, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So as someone that writes about AI innovation and how it's quickly integrating into our many facets of our everyday lives, I want to get your general take on the use of AI for marital and relationship help. Are you a fan? Yes or no?
I would say right now, no. I have heard some stories of people having some success, but I think that the lack of reliability and frankly just how bad things can go very fast in marriages because of AI use and using AI for this very, journalistic, not journalistic, but, like pseudo-journaling, pseudo-therapy use case. I think right now it is quite risky, and I think, do so at your own risk is what I would say.
Do so at your own risk. Okay, we're going to get into that. But first, let's get into your article. You wrote a piece titled, ChatGPT is blowing up marriages as spouses use AI to attack their partners. Loaded statement, but the anecdotes that you shared in the piece really do speak to that. So for those who've yet to read it, can you share some of those stories and relationships that basically fell apart because of AI?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this story was based on over a dozen individual tales of marriages falling apart. And we've seen, this phenomenon. Some, mental health experts will call it AI psychosis. This phenomenon of people, having these really intense mental health crises that are, characterized by these delusional spirals. That has also impacted marriage. This is a bit different. This is people, using AI as like a life coach or a marriage counselor, as a confidant, as a best friend, and just really inviting AI as this, way to get advice and commentary on their world and their life. And it just taking these really, really dark turns. And the way that it manifests is different. In some cases, it's, a marriage is perfectly fine. And suddenly, one spouse starts, using AI to kind of, rehash old arguments, bring, past moments, past arguments back into the forefront. All of a sudden, they're kind of rewriting the narrative of the marriage, rewriting the narrative of the couple, often to the distress and anguish and surprise of the spouse who's not using AI. And then the marriage will very quickly erode from there. In some cases, a marriage is already very troubled. Maybe it's already, one person might characterize it as abusive or unhealthy, and AI kind of comes in as this accelerating force. And there is, there's a story included in the piece where, this marriage was unhealthy, and the spouse that we talked to, the former spouse we talked to, was very, very clear about that. But that her, then wife, they're in the car with their 2 young children. And in what had been at that point a pretty common phenomenon, or a common, use case for AI in this particular marriage, the driver of the vehicle with the 2 young kids in the back seat takes out their phone. They start, asking AI to, analyze the marriage, analyze the other spouse. They're blasting it at full volume. The kids in the back seat can hear it. It, turns into this kind of like ritual admonishment in a sense. It's really, really, I've heard the audio. It's very disturbing to listen to, and is not a healthy environment, for the spouse who's not using AI, and also, of course, not for the children who are in the car at the time too. But yeah, the way that it's manifesting, so it can be that, which is quite extreme, and is, the furthering of this clearly very unhealthy dynamic. And sometimes it's just, maybe a spouse turns to AI and, says, I'm really frustrated about this. And the AI says, you should be frustrated. And it just feeds into that. It's very sycophantic. It's very, affirmative. And it just feeds into that frustrated feeling that a lot of us, feel in our marriage from time to time. I'm married. Sometimes I'm frustrated, and sometimes I'm in the right and sometimes I'm in the wrong. But it's more likely than not than the AI is going to tell me that I'm in the right every time, which, isn't what an actually therapeutic environment or therapeutic setting is supposed to do.
You mentioned that you interviewed, or you talked to, or you got the reports of more than a dozen couples. When reading through their interactions with AI or ChatGPT, did anything surprise you? Did you come across anything that was like, whoa, this is kind of insane. I didn't think it would get to this point.
I mean, I've been in so much of this that I feel like at this point, it's, investigating this and similar stories, it's hard to surprise me at this point. That recording I heard was definitely like really striking, really alarming. I think something that continues to surprise me is just the volume that I see. People aren't just, there's one story included in the article that we published, of, a woman was telling us that her now former husband, who she's in a custody battle with, was just sending her pages after pages after pages. And so to me, the volume is often quite startling of just how it not only signifies how much time one spouse is spending with the AI, and how, that use might just be getting really unhealthy, even in terms of time spent. Like, you wouldn't want your spouse watching that much like TV or spending that much time. It's a large chunk of their days that they're just spending going back and forth with the AI model, and often just spiraling over one topic. And so, yeah, volume is definitely continues to be alarming to me. And then, yeah, these more like outlier cases that are still pretty startling regarding, that the car scene, that recording, that was pretty surprising to me.
After analyzing all the data and all the interactions, did you, just by sheer analysis, did you notice a pattern in any of them, or among them? Did you see any reoccurring themes?
Sure, that's an interesting question. One thing that I found striking, and of course this is anecdotal, and I'm not, going to, from my position, like, I will not diagnose a marriage based on, these,
Yes.
Again, like, it's not for the AI and it's not for the reporter, like, it's for an actual, licensed professional. But there was more than one instance where, you know, a spouse said that they were very suddenly accused of abuse, and it was something that had never been part of their world as a couple. And, they'd been in couples therapy and it had never come up. And, spouses had, what they called like abuse checklists that they'd made with the AI and then provided them to the spouse, or you like reference them in conversations with the spouse. That was a really interesting kind of data point that was present throughout a few different cases that I, heard about and looked into. Something else that was really common between cases was just this very common experience where suddenly these very old issues, like a lot of these couples have been together for many years. In some cases, there are people who've been together for, maybe 5 years or under, but these were a lot of decade plus long unions. Like maybe they've been together for 15 years, married for 10, but there are a lot of like 15 to 20-year marriages included in this piece. And people said, a large chunk of the people that I talked to, they said that suddenly all of these issues that they thought that they had, discussed already were just roaring ferociously back into present day out of absolutely nowhere. And when they found chats and they looked at chats, they saw, their spouse had been talking about this with the AI and kind of woven this narrative, or this is a present day problem. And, maybe the spouse was frustrated about it. Maybe like they thought that it was never, they hadn't closed the door on it the way that the other spouse might have thought they closed the door. They had a different narrative of that to begin with. But it wasn't a present day conversation, according to, the spouses that we talked to. And I think that was definitely a big theme. And also just the sense of rumination that, when spouses were able to, whether shots were being sent to them or whether they, were able to see them in other ways, maybe left the browser open, for example, that they just saw this sense of rumination where their spouse was, talking with the AI about one thing and just at great length. Maybe they're not like churning out pages of, explanations or, pseudotherapeutic languages sent to the other spouse, but that they were just spending hours and hours and hours focusing on just one point and not moving on, which rumination generally is not a healthy behavior, whether it's, individually or in a marriage. So
do you think there's a difference between turning to chat for like relationship advice versus friendship advice? Like both are personal dynamics and I get that, but something about asking like a robot for advice on like such an intimate topic or like a romantic matter just seems personally so much worse than like maybe a platonic situation.
I hesitate. I mean, frankly, I've seen more conversations and more, heard from more people, whether they're in a relationship or in like familial situations, whether, their brother or their sibling or their parent is, becomes, invested in these unhealthy use patterns of the chatbot. I do think that there's a lot at stake. Like, I don't have kids with my friends. I would like that's a terrible anecdote because like I don't have kids in general. I don't have any kids to be a friend. I don't have any children, but like there is just a lot at stake in a marriage. Like you've built a life together. Not that like personal relationships with friends aren't very important, and they are very emotionally loaded at times, and they are just really important pillars of our lives. It is painful, if somebody were to engage in a chatbot and, in this unhealthy way and a relationship with a friend were to crumble, like that would be really painful. But I think that in terms of like practical, like there's less at stake. Like you might not own a house with your friend.
I feel like a lot of the release and like relief even that people get from perhaps venting on chat is that first part of it, that release of their thoughts and their feelings, like writing it down, getting it out, which makes me just like when I read those stories and your article, I would just like go journal, like just write it out somewhere. You know what I mean? Objectively, journaling is a good thing when you're going through a fight or when you're just going through something in general. But I think just like a lot of the relief was that release of their feelings. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. And I think to that point, I think that we need to like really consider on our end, like what is journaling? Like, cause like I'm a very avid journaler. When I journal, I'm kind of, journaling to the void, and the void is not responding to me and reframing my thoughts.
Right.
Like the void is just a void. Like I write, I close my notebook and like I ruminate on it. I untangle my thoughts. I think about it. But like ultimately, like the page is not responding to me, which in some cases for me is very helpful. Like sometimes I just need to, maybe I'll get it on a page and I'll never think about it again. Or maybe I'll get it on a page and I'll finally understand it. But there is something, to be said about, you are journaling in a sense that you're pouring your heart out, you're, saying something very personal, you are, engaging with ChatGPT about something that is, in this, like, again, like pseudo-therapeutic setting, but ultimately it is responding and you're carrying out a conversation. And I think that is a really, really important distinction from what we would traditionally consider journaling. And that was something that spouses said too, where, they had, for example, there was one spouse included in the story who they were a very avid journaler. And instead of it, when they started using ChatGPT, they stopped sitting down and writing down their thoughts. And they started just going outside and sitting on the porch and having these like long, drawn out conversations where they just sat for a long time and talked using the voice feature, just talked back and forth. And we need to ask ourselves, like, is that journaling and what purpose does it serve? And then also, when we think about what therapy is and what something that's therapeutic is, like, are you actually working through something or are you coping? Or, are you venting, which is different than, working through something in a therapist, especially if you have this, consumer product that is very sycophantic and is likely telling you that, you're right about a lot of what you're saying. And maybe you're not. Maybe you do need to be challenged, or maybe you are right, but this just is an unreliable setting for this to take place. So I think we need to, like, when it comes to considering whether to use these tools in this way, just really think hard about, what we expect from them back and what would be healthy to get back from them.
For those that are listening that maybe feel a little victimized, that maybe do indulge in a little chat therapy session, what would you tell them in terms of why exactly feeding your problems into a chatbot isn't necessarily the most productive, even though it may feel good? But why, on the surface level, what would you tell them about why it's not helpful?
I mean, again, I think it is true that some people have had, helpful experiences, and I completely respect and I understand and I appreciate that. And ultimately, I'm happy if somebody has been able to, like, find healing or be able to reframe something in a way that feels positive. I would personally just really emphasize the lack of reliability and to make sure that we are, thinking of our interactions with them through a lens that includes psychological safeguards. Like, when I, enter into this conversation, I need to think about really hard about what I'm expecting back. And, it's kind of like how we have a friend, like I have my friend that I go to when I just want to be coddled, like, hey, something bad happened today.
Yeah.
And you know what, maybe I was part of the problem, but
I don't
right
need to hear
now,
that.
like,
I don't
I'll
need to
talk
hear
to
that.
that friend
Yeah.
tomorrow. Right now, what I need to hear is, like, we just need to go get a drink and just, we all have, like, our different friends that we go to for different reasons. And so I think that when we think about the relationship with the chatbot, like, one, it is a consumer technology. Like, ultimately, it is not your friend in the sense that it does not have stakes in its relationship with you. It is a piece of consumer technology that is, monetizing your interactions with it. One, which is, that's not the relationship I have with the friends in my life or, the confidants in my life. And would be a pretty unhealthy dynamic to have with a confidant in general. I would hope that people, we pay therapists, but it's a
Right.
different, But I think that, I think that just making sure, this technology is supposed to have guardrails. Often they fail. But I think we need to start conceptualizing them in a way where we are thinking about, our own psychological guardrails when we enter. Like, you should have your guard up. If it's not questioning you, you probably should keep that in mind.
You talk about this concept of validation dependency, which you associate with being addicted to social media. Tell me about that and how it kind of plays into all of this.
Validation dependency is, yes, associated with social media use. And yeah, I mean, it's got a physical effect on us. Again, like, if somebody's telling me that I'm great and I'm right about everything, that feels really, really good. And I'm probably going to seek that out more than I seek out somebody telling me that, like, I'm terrible and wrong. In many ways, this is so relatable because it does feed on so many just natural human tendencies and human wishes. And I mean, even, when you use a chatbot, if you're using ChatGPT, you're going to, see those little thumbs up and thumbs down responses pop up. And, what the company's been saying is that part of the problem here is that people are saying thumbs up to these very sycophantic responses. It's just human nature. And yeah, but regarding validation dependency, when we stop having a healthy relationship to that, because ultimately, like, constant validation is probably not helpful to us on an individual level, and it can cause addictive tendencies and unhealthy use patterns. That's where we need to be really, really careful and be very discerning about the ways that we're, engaging with AI and very human-like emotive AI chatbots.
Yeah. I think some arguments for using like chatbots and like just like ChatGPT in general for therapy, quote unquote, or like, advice is the fact that, accessibility wise, it's basically free, and it's accessible. You don't have to book an appointment. You don't have to wait for an appointment. It's there when you need it. And it doesn't involve sharing personal details to a human. You are barred from being judged in that way. Can you agree that maybe a surface level use of chat when you're going through a hard time is okay? Or do you think you should just stay away from it altogether?
I mean, I've had, psychiatrists who have been, following AI and how it relates to the human psyche and, in some cases, AI mental health crises. They'll say, I had a bad breakup and in the middle of the night, like I opened up my phone and I just needed some soothing. And so I just talked to ChatGPT. I don't want to demonize a technology and a product because ultimately it is a product. It's not this insidious, evil force that has like will or agency. Like it's not trying to mess up your life. Like it just is a consumer technology. But yeah, I think I go back to just a grain of salt. Like just be careful, Again, I just think it's deeply unreliable. And I think, most of us, I think a lot of us think that we're invulnerable. I know I have often in my life thought that I was invulnerable, but I think ultimately like what is being whether it's in AI, just being really good at not intentionally, but, seeing the crack in a marriage, for example, and just stepping on it really hard. And, in part because, maybe the person who's using the chatbot who's talking about their marriage problems, wants to talk about it and they just keep ruminating and ruminating and ruminating. And ultimately, it just blows up. It gets so big. I think it can do that in a lot of us in the sense of we all have vulnerabilities. We all have things that frustrate us. We all have this desire to be validated and to be seen. And so, again, I think just going into conversations, especially as it regards very personal information and very, these very personal, whether it's regarding our mental health or our relationships or just, daily life, sometimes we just want to vent about it. I think as long as we go into those interactions with the understanding that we are talking to code.
OpenAI has committed to several changes, including like potential parental controls or like push notifications with how long you're using the app. And while those are a good start, we've also seen similar measures, quote unquote measures, taken from other social apps. But these measures are pretty easy to circumvent if you really want to use the app. Like who's to say that you're going to like actually be authentic with what age you're signing up? Are there more viable safety measures that are perhaps written on the wall that OpenAI is just avoiding because they just want to make money? Which is, it is their prerogative. They're a company. This is not, I don't think they made ChatGPT to, save the world. I think they made it to make money and advance tech, and that's their prerogative. But do you think there's other ways to help keep users safe that maybe OpenAI is just avoiding?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think Sam Altman would probably tell you that he did make ChatGPT to save the world and bring about super intelligence and all the things. Yeah, I'm really skeptical of things like the parental guardrails that I've seen so far. There's been reporting this past week, I believe, that showed that the parental guardrails are in place on ChatGPT currently, which were implemented in response to a very devastating lawsuit regarding the death of a child, have not worked, that are very easily circumventable. And in general, the tech industry has been super resistant to things like parental guardrails, and a lot of it is very surface level and not comprehensive by any means. But yeah, I think right now we exist in a technological landscape where the regulatory burden falls very heavily on the consumer, on the parents, on the individuals who are using the platform. And especially in the United States, the tech industry has largely for many years gone without significant regulation. The AI industry in particular is effectively self-regulated. They're very, there's no federally recognized safety standards. There are some, state level actions taking place, but certainly nothing comprehensive on the federal level. And yeah, so I referenced that lawsuit. So recently, in response to this devastating lawsuit, OpenAI declared that they came out as part of, their response to the New York Times, who first, broke this story, said that long-term use of ChatGPT erodes guardrails. I would probably argue that if long-term use of a product that you're not kicking people off of if they use it too long causes the guardrails to go away. It's like saying that if you drive a car for too long, the seatbelt's and the brakes are going to fall out. Like, why is that car on the road? So to me, it goes back to like foundational, what were the safeguards when something was put into the marketplace? Or did you put it into the marketplace because you knew it was going to be lucrative? You wanted to move quickly. You are in this very, at the time, behind the scenes AI race, and you want to get this chatbot out into the public. I would go back to like, what is the foundational reason for this existing in the public sphere at all beyond you wanted to put it out? Which to me, when it comes to consumer rights and consumer safety, isn't a super sound way to go about product release. So
You did mention there something about federal regulation. Here in Canada, we do have an AI minister, and it's still a new role. And I am interested to see how this minister and these federal agents will, protect while also appreciating the advancement of AI and all these technologies. How do you see AI regulation moving forward?
Oh, right now I'm pretty pessimistic. I think the current administration, the Trump administration, has made it very clear that they are not super keen on regulating AI. There are some interesting measures currently moving through the Capitol, especially as regards kids and AI, which of course, we need obviously to protect kids, and that feels more promising. But the reality is that, adults are experiencing harm as well. And whether we'll have something that's a bit more expansive or just very, limited to kids and minors and minor use is unclear right now. But yeah, I'm pessimistic on the federal level. There are some measures moving through, but I think that Silicon Valley is an incredibly powerful lobbying force with very, very, influential players that have, the ears of the administration right now. So that is something that I wish I was more optimistic about, but I'm not. As far as this particular administration goes, I'm not super optimistic about it. I think that the best way to regulate right now, or what we'll probably see first, is more on the state level and more as it regards kids versus more like comprehensive safety stuff overall. But ultimately, the cigarette warning is there for everybody.
All right. Well, I'm going to leave it at that. Maggie Harrison Dupré, senior writer for Futurism. Thank you so much for this very interesting chat.
Thank you.
And that was The Big Story. We'd love to hear what you think of this conversation. Be sure to reach us on X at TheBigStoryFPN or shoot us an email at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca. If you think you know someone that would get a kick out of this episode, well, be sure to share it with them as well. You can listen to The Big Story every day, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Maria Kestane. Thanks for listening.